What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave, and today we're going to have kind of a micro deck tech. We're not going to be doing the whole cards on the tabletop thing. We're going to be talking very briefly about the deck that I chose to play for set championships and what my results were. Before we dive into that, as always, I got to give a big shout out to the Patreons for making the giveaways on the channel possible. You guys are incredible, and I appreciate you always taking the time to support the channel. If you want to support me as a creator, you can check out the Patreon at the link in the description. We have tiers as low as $1 where you can support the channel directly, and all of the money that we make from the Patreon does go directly back to giveaways. We are typically doing a giveaway about every 1,000 subscribers with a booster box. We also do Patreon exclusive giveaways, and I'm very excited to announce we have a Patreon exclusive playmat coming pretty soon. So if you want to check that out, definitely jump over to the Patreon link in the description. But for set championships, I chose to play Amethyst Steel. I think it's a really good deck. I've done quite well with it previously at this set championships, the only one that I played in and one of the last ones to happen. So we show up, and I think we had around 6 or 7 regulars from the store, including myself, signed up and ready to play. Ended up having around 20 plus people come there who I haven't seen previously. They just came out there for set championships, including John Williams. Some of you guys probably know who he is, Dragon John Z. He came out and of course managed a top 8, no surprise there. If you are curious, he played Ruby Sapphire, didn't want to step outside of his box for a small local tournament, just played what he knows. That being said, my first matchup I played against Sapphire Steel. I did go 2-1 in that matchup. I lost, I think, the first game and won the subsequent 2 games. He got a really poor draw one of the games, which definitely helped me along. So I teched my deck specifically to play against aggro and to play against Ruby Sapphire. Those were the decks I expected to see the most of, including Amber Steel. I was teched pretty well for that matchup also. So I felt really good about my chances. Thought a lot of people were going to play like Diggy, Steel Song, Ruby Sapphire, that kind of thing. Of course, going into match 2, I ended up playing against Ruby Amethyst, a deck that I hadn't been super tech for. I did tech in some rabbits to try to prepare for that, but the Ruby Amethyst player was still able to beat me 2-0 by being able to be prepared 3 times game 1 and then 2 times game 2 on top of like double Medusas, Tremaine, Bounce, shenanigans, just like the whole game. Kind of absolutely gas draw both games and ended up beating me. I think I got to like 16 one game, but wasn't quite able to eke it out to those 20 lore. Following match, I ended up sitting down against Ruby Amethyst again. This time I think I was at table 4. In that matchup, ended up getting 2-0'd again. Second game, I think I was at 19 because he was only able to be prepared me twice. But the first game, much like my opponent in the previous round, he was able to hit me with 3 be prepareds, which really messed me up. So that is my big crux with this deck. If I get be prepared once, sure, I can play around and be prepared twice. Probably could play around that too. Be prepared 3 times definitely gets pretty tough. Like I mentioned in the second matchup, I got be prepared twice and was still able to get out 19 lore before my opponent was able to win. So it was super close game. So then that put me at a point where I was 1-2 going into round 4. There were only going to be 5 rounds. In round 4, I ended up playing the Amethyst Steel Mirror, except my opponent was playing Jafar Amethyst Steel. Game 1, I didn't realize he was going to be playing the Jafar deck. It was a pretty new player. I thought he was still going to have some more basic cards, honestly. Wasn't anticipating the Jafar, so he was able to eke it out, get to 20. He hit a couple whole new worlds and got to 17 real quick, and then it was really hard for me to pull back even after taking out that Jafar. Game 2 and 3, I knew he was playing Jafar, so I mulliganed aggressively for Zeus. I planned to play a line that was going to get me in a position where I could sing Zeus before Jafar was going to be a problem. I also shot for the fire the cannons to deal with those 3-2 Jafars, so I mulliganed a little more effectively game 2 and 3, and I was able to pull those games out and win that match. And then at that point, that's where the whole tournament went to crap, so to speak, because we're going into round 5. There were exactly 8 players who already had 9 or more points. They all decided to ID and make it to top 8 together. Unfortunately, none of those players were players who regularly play at the store. Some of those players were perfectly nice people that I had conversations with over the course of the day, and I was super happy that they did well, but it was kind of a bummer for some of the people who were sitting at a position where they were 2-2 like myself. Those people did decide to play out their round 5 just because it's like you're already there. I played out my round 5. I ended up playing against Baja Blast. If you're not familiar with that deck, that is Sapphire Emerald doing some bounce shenanigans. I made a video on the deck list before on the channel, so if you want to check that out, I'll throw a link card on screen. But I played against that deck. I did end up going 2-1 again, so I won that match, and I was at a point where I had 9 points. Like I mentioned, everybody going into that round ID'd into the top 8. So it's just one of those situations where had my matches occurred in a different order, had I played those Ruby Amethyst decks at the end and been at a point going into round 5 where I was already 3-1, I would have been one of those players who could have ID'd. But instead, I lost round 2, lost round 3, and then I was in a position where I had to play out my last 2 rounds to even get to the 9 points, and wasn't going to be able to be in a position to ID. So I did end up in 10th. Another local player ended up 9th, and all of the top 8 were non-local players. So none of us who locally play at that store were able to come away with a scar or a set championship mat. I know there were several players who had already won one or both. So, I mean, it was just kind of a bummer for the local players, but like I mentioned, I'm super happy for the players that did well in the tournament. I do hope maybe in the future we can look at doing something like not allowing IDing, so that players just have to play it out, and then whoever gets into the top 8 on their merit gets into the top 8 on their merit, and not the people who had the best matchups in the best order. Like I mentioned, there were several players who were at 10 points, so they just barely made that jump. So the players who had their matches in that better order for them, where they got their better matchups first, were able to get in. The players who had their worst matchups first and their better matchups later were not able to get in. So I do think that IDing can be a little bit of a negative thing to the game at times, when it just shuts everybody else out. Like, it was a point going into round 5 where like the majority of the players just left because there was no reason to play round 5. We played it out because we're already there. We already paid for a tournament. So a handful of players played it out, but a lot of people were just like, okay, everybody ID'd in, I'm just going to go home, bye. So I think that kind of took something away. It felt like anticlimactic in a way. Hopefully the players who won enjoyed it and, you know, deserve the winnings and are happy with what they got. Hopefully they'll come out and support the store in the future. That is kind of my takeaway from set championships. Could I have played a different deck? Sure. Do I still think that deck was the right one to play, and had I had my matchups in a different order, it would have gone differently for me? Absolutely. I think Amethyst Steel is really good. I think this deck list that I've put together is very dialed in. I've been playing it over the course of the set. What are your thoughts on IDing? Were you able to win a scar? How did your set championships go? How many did you play? Do you have 1,000 playmats to hang up on your wall or to sell on eBay or whatever people do with them? If you enjoyed this video, drop a like. If you're playing something different with the Amethyst Steel list, let me know in the comments below. Are you on Olaf like Earlmeister? When you see those toys, video games, and a crowd of people you've never seen before raging in at set championships, remember, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.